Good morrow, Ashers! Social events or elements are the most important thing in an MMO, or at least one of the most important things. Ironically, many games think that it can only be a glorified friend list or friends list with a few fluff things tacked on, and that is what a guild system should be. I do not agree even the slightest bit. Guilds should be the foundation on which MMOs are built, especially in Ashes of Creation where they do not plan to have inherent factions in the game, and instead rely on players creating factions and interacting in that way instead. Today I would like to talk about the guild system that we already know about, which is very limited mind you, and what I think is important and possible and should exist or should not exist within the guild system in Ashes of Creation. Let me know what you think though, I really would like to know. There's not a lot of inspiration to draw from in terms of features that are not super shallow. So what would you like to see in terms of features? What is important to you and how do you want to be engaged inside the game when communicating or interacting with your friends in a guild? Let me know in the comments below. First, I would like to go into a few things, and I'll just quickly run through them, that I think are important when creating a guild system that makes it both cohesive and fun at the same time. These are just a list that I want to add. I'm not going to go too deeply into them. Some of them will be discussed later on in the other sections. The probably most important one out of this list will be having a reason to actually go and do things with your guildies. To progress as a group or guild makes for the system to be much more interesting. These kinds of progressions should be in the form of either character progression or cosmetic progression, or even more importantly kind of trophies and achievements that you might be able to put down in a guild hall where everyone can come and see it. For example, if your guild won a guild war, you can display a trophy in your guild hall, as well as have your guild banner displayed on, let's say, your shield, with a gold border around that shield to indicate that you recently had a victory in a guild battle. Additional rewards that are there when you are more than a certain amount of people completing something, like for example a caravan as 10 guildies, or even a siege or a node attack on several guildies, should provide additional rewards because you're doing it as a guild. Maybe give yourself a additional boost even when playing with those guildies. So your guild boost, let's say 5% increased damage for 5 minutes or the first 5 minutes of the fight should be present to make it more encouraged to play with your guildies. Ashes of Creation is heavily built around investment in the long term, to progress your character, to progress different things, and guilds should be similar. Players should be incentivized to stay within a guild as long as possible, or as much as possible, and not guild hop a lot. So by doing so, they must gain some kind of additional buffs or rewards or something, just some kind of encouragement to stay in a guild and progress within that system. I don't think it is healthy for a game when it is easy to drop from a guild and within another day or two you are suddenly in another one and you are able to actually go and participate and get all the rewards from a different guild at the drop of a hat. Guilds should be part of that investment that Ashes of Creation is hoping to do. On the subject of progression, that leads me to what Intrepid is actually planning for guilds and how they are going to integrate with the system. Intrepid is attempting to integrate the progression of a guild all the way from the guild as a whole down to a character level. As a concept, this is something that has very little to no precedent in other games. These include a wide variety of things that they plan, from cosmetics, passive abilities, whether they be combat or buffs is unclear, but it's definitely going to be some sort of passive ability that will affect you in combat, and even unique quest lines that will be unlocked by getting to certain guild levels. To obtain these, you would need to complete a range of tasks, from sieges to caravans and other quests. So it's not going to be something that's easy to achieve, but at the same time, it is also a major aspect to your character and how it moves forward in the world, as well as your group that you play together. Intrepid plans to leverage the augment system, which characters are already going to have available to themselves to change the way they play or their skills interact, to provide guild members with additional skill points and abilities or passive abilities that actually progresses them on a character level. Interestingly, they also plan to use skill point system to balance out the different guild sizes between each other. A larger guild will have fewer points available to spend on a character level compared to a smaller guild having more of those abilities available to spend. Quality over quantity being the kind of thing they're going for here. While this sounds like a really intuitive way to improve the quality of life of smaller guilds, I'm not sure this is going to be practical in reality at all. Time will tell how it turns out, but if Intrepid manages to pull this off, smaller guilds would be effective at kind of skirmishing, disruption, and smaller, almost guerrilla-like warfare, while larger guilds will be better in open combat, where numbers matter more. I'm really skeptical about this being actually workable, but I hope it is, because at the end of the day, a smaller guild doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It usually creates a more tight-knit community where people share values a lot more closely. So there is value in smaller guilds. I personally am one of those players where I'll have 10 of my friends being super hardcore and we're going to try our best to do certain amounts of things. But larger guilds will have an obvious advantage against people like me. But this system might change that to a little less advantageous for the larger guild. Just like damn near everything in Ashes of Creation, the guild system ties into the wider world. Be it nodes, questing, caravans, PvP, everything is tied together, and guilds are no exception. The fact that guilds need to actually commit to a node via a patronage system for certain levels of progression already creates a situation where nodes will be heavily invested into by these guilds. This is very good, as guilds are essentially going to stick to different nodes, and players will have to stick to guilds and nodes as a result. This helps kind of foster that dynamic pseudo-factions that Intrepid plans to implement, and actually create tension between two different groups of players intuitively, without needing a faction system like WoW has, for example, to encourage PvP between the factions. Just like Eve, this even has the potential to create real spy networks and kind of espionage behind it, which is an incredibly fun concept in some cases, which is both frustrating for the receiving end, but also very nice and natural, almost super realistic, if I can put it, for lack of a better word. For those that know about Goonswarm, this could potentially have a big impact on how the world progresses. Thankfully, this world is more server-based, so if Goonswarm's giving you problems, then you can obviously move to a different server. But that is part of the fun, so I wouldn't get too frustrated if stuff like that ends up happening. Sigh. Guild halls, the feature that everyone wants in the games that they play, or at least social games that they play, but when it gets added to the game, it is a watered down, useless feature that no one realistically uses. It is one of those features where everyone likes to talk about it, and the potential is incredible. But the real life usage, or the real in-game usage to be more accurate, is usually really poor. Guild Wars 2, for example, does the guild hall in a very superficial way. You've got decorations and slight buffs to your rewards, but it is so minimal, and the amount of time that you actually spend within the guild hall is damn near zero. This is pretty much the effect that is across every single game that tries to introduce some form of guild hall. So I could very much be wrong here. You could potentially, and please do, provide me with an example of a guild hall system that actually works well, not just on a superficial level, but in a meaningful gameplay level. If that's the case, please let me know in the comments. However, that doesn't mean that Intrepid can't pull off a meaningful guild hall system. I am just inherently skeptical about it. Intrepid doesn't seem to have a lot of information around guild wars at the moment. There's just two major things that this allows you to do. One of them being it is applied to a freehold on a node that the guild becomes a patron of. So your guild becomes a patron, you can actually apply a guild hall to a freehold slot, so to speak. This might tie into the guild wars, which is a type of PvP that might take place. I'll discuss that in a little bit. But those are the only two tie-ins that the guild hall might have at this point in time. They might come up with more ideas. I don't have any other extra ideas, and I wish we could draw inspiration from somewhere. But as I mentioned, it's just usually very superficial. That brings me to the guild wars, as in the act of declaring and fighting war between two guilds. The system is in really early days of development, and by that I mean probably conceptual, and might not actually make the final cut of the actual game's release. I am very skeptical about this one as well. It is something that is very hard to implement, because what they're trying to do here is actually make a destructible guild hall or fortress in some cases. So let's say a siege is successful on a node, the guild hall or the takeover then destroys the guild hall. I would rather want to see this in a instanced PvP setup. So an objective based fight in an instant map where two guilds meet up with a leaderboard and actually fight each other. Let's say over this course of an hour, and see who comes out victorious, instead of having it in the open world. This could create a situation where guilds have pride and compete with each other on a kind of more structured format. I don't think this needs to tie into the rest of the world, because the node system already encourages guilds to go out and fight each other. So this could be something that's separate, and I hope it is at the end of the day, simply because of the complexity involved in making it work within the open world. However, if they actually manage to pull off a decent guild war system in the open world, and this will require an incredible amount of development to not frustrate both parties, or even just make it decently fun in the first place, then I am all for it. If they want to spend the time to make it good and properly support it, then I am all for the idea of guild wars within the open world that actually tie into all the other systems of the game, which is pretty much exactly what I wanted from this game in the first place. So I'm not shooting down the idea, I'm just saying that if it is in the game, it needs to be excellent and heavily supported. And that wraps up the video for today. I would like to just know, do you guys actually want to join guilds yet? When are you planning to join guilds? On launch day, a week before, a month before, a year before? How do you use guilds? Do you just use it as a glorified LFG and friends list, or integrate more heavily? Do you play a ton with those people, or just kind of when you're doing endgame content? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks guys for watching and listening. I hope you have an awesome Sunday evening, and may Ashes of Creation be the best MMO ever to be released. I'm out.